Woody Guthrie did. He changed his mind about race, and his behavior followed that change in outlook. Sometime between his radio gig in Los Angeles in 1937 and his arrival in New York City in 1940, he altered his worldview about race relations, dramatically and permanently. In doing so, he was fully out of step with his times. For a white working stiff to get political in the 1930s, that was pretty common. To join the labor movement, even to be a fellow traveler, that was pretty common. You made some enemies, but you had plenty of friends. But for white folks to cross the color line in the late 1930s and then try to erase it, that was not common in the late 1930s. And this, Woody Guthrie was ahead of his time. Woody on his own faced down the demons of white supremacy. He made his decision. This was no put on. You could put on the folksy charm, you could put on the religious robe, you could put on a lot of masks in the 1930s, but you couldn't put on racial equality. If you were going to go down that road, you had to go down it, and you had to mean it, and you had to live out the consequences, and that's what Woody did. And he lost a lot of friends, and he lost congenial relations with a lot of his immediate family. He paid a price, but seemingly without any regrets. The obvious question, the one you want me to answer, is why? Why he made this change? There was, of course, that letter that Dan referred to, but many a performer would just throw that letter in the trash and keep going. There was the sheer kaleidoscope of color that he saw rambling around the country, and that surely made a difference in his outlook as he saw people of all colors suffering, people of all colors helping one another to survive the dire times. But you know, there's another response to hard times, and many a poor white person responded in that alternative, more familiar fashion, which is to hang on more tightly to white supremacy when you're being pushed down, so that you'll always have someone to look down upon when you're down and out. Woody took a different path. He embraced a new racial outlook, a new vision of American freedom that was not intended simply for whites only, but was open to all, that must be open to all if American freedom was to mean anything important. Thank you. Blessings, thank you. The why may never be known. We have hints. Look at Ed's book, look at Joe's book, look at all the books. Everything Nora's putting out right now, wonderful. And think about it, dwell upon it. But today I can't answer the why, but I do want us to think about the distance, the different question of how far Woody Guthrie had to go to make this journey from Southern racism to racial egalitarianism. And to do so, I would like to begin in Okemah, Oklahoma, Woody Guthrie's hometown, in a lynching photograph of 1911. Slide, please. Okemah, Oklahoma is located in the part of Oklahoma that is known as Little Dixie because it's a cotton growing area and perhaps because of its racial ideology. This photograph was taken in 1911 on the bridge overstretching the Canadian River south of Okemah. And this is a lynching photograph, and I'm sorry to show it, but I'll have to tell you why. 2 blacks were lynched that day in 1911, 1 year before Woody's birth, the Nelsons. On your right, hanging off the bridge, that's the mother. On the left, less visible, but you can see enough, that's her teenage son. The teenager had been accused of murdering the Okemah sheriff, may well have done so. His mother took the blame to try to save her son. Both were arrested. What happened next was all too typical and sadly all too familiar in Woody Guthrie's world of his childhood. The suspects were taken from the jail by a white mob, lynched in a formal fashion, hanged from the bridge, after which the town photographer would come out and take pictures, which would be turned into postcards and sold for a nickel or a dime. The important part of this photograph for our story today is that Woody's father, Charlie Guthrie, was probably in that crowd looking out at the bridge. Charlie Guthrie, Woody's father, was a hands-down white supremacist, and he did all he could, politically, culturally, violently, to keep blacks down, to keep them in their place. The year after this lynching, Woody Guthrie was born. And he grew up on his father's knee, hearing about the necessity of white supremacy and the glories of white superiority. And he probably, I don't know, probably saw this photograph. And he loved his daddy. He didn't break with race because he was mad at his dad. He broke with race and lost his relationship. Next slide. Now break away from that lynching in 1911, and let's go to a different place altogether. New York City, 1940, February of that year. This is a lyric for the song Slipknot, which is one of several anti-lynching songs that Woody Guthrie wrote. And I call your attention to the beautifully scripted, carefully written lyric that speaks against lynching and speaks against the power of the state to choose who lives or dies. And look at the script. Look how neatly he wrote it out. He wrote it in longhand, didn't type it sloppily at his typewriter, didn't splash watercolors over it like so many of his lyrics, didn't put little jokes around it. This mattered to Woody Guthrie. He took his time with it. And I want you to note in particular the little asterisk at the bottom left of the page, and I'm going to enlarge what that says because it's vitally important to what we're saying here today. Next slide, please. It's so clearly written you may be able to read it where you are. Dedicated to the many Negro fathers, mothers, and sons alike that was lynched and hanged under the bridge of the Canadian River 7 miles south of Okemah, Oklahoma. And to the day when such will be no more. I have seen the lyrics of many a folk song, but I have never seen the lyric of a folk song in which a white Southerner apologizes for a lynching in which his father was a participant. Woody Guthrie had changed his mind and had changed it in a way that he wanted the world to know about. That lost him white friends, but it gained him African American friends. Next slide, please. I apologize. This is an additional Woody Guthrie artwork. This is the slipknot illustration that he provided to go along with the lyric. He's breaking ties, consciously. But that put him in good company with some African Americans who had seen their hard side of traveling. Next slide, please. Huddy Leadbelly, the famous blues master. He had been in 2 chain gang southern prisons, sang his way out of both, made it to New York, settled in, settled down. He got his own radio station, Leadbelly did. He got it, not his own station, he got his own radio show in New York, and he could play whatever he wanted, and he could have whatever guest he wanted, and I think it's very important, very telling, that in 1940 he invited Woody Guthrie to join him on the radio show. They both played bad guy ballads for that, Jesse James and the like, in their way. Woody's body language is very important here. I want you to look at it, to think on it, to dwell on it, and think about his father, Charlie. Charlie would have hated this picture. Woody looking up to a black man. Woody proud to be playing second fiddle to a black man. Woody's not ashamed to be there and looking up. Woody's changed his mind. He's traveled a long journey from the Canadian River Bridge. Now, of course, if you were an African-American friend of Woody, then you had to put up with Woody just like all his white friends did. Woody was a handful now. Woody was a handful. And once he became friends with Leadbelly and Sonny Terry, he would crash their apartments just like his white friends and pass out on the couch just like with his white friends and mess around and come and go and hello and so long, and they all took him in and let him go. We're going to sing Stew Ball.